Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Welcome back to another episode of Unemployed and Afraid. A big thank you to you for being here and lending me your ears for episode 6. And episode 6 is a little bit of a mini milestone. It was actually the original plan that I had when I decided to start this podcast. I would make it a short mini series and find some wonderful people to talk to about their story of starting over. But I am absolutely going to be keeping going. I'm loving the chats, getting to connect with people in this way, and I'm really enjoying myself. So it is just me, pretty grassroots stuff. I record from my little office at home. So when you listen, rate or review, do love heart things, message, comment, share, whatever the act of getting in touch with me, it means the absolute world. This is a labor of love. It does cost me money to make it happen, but I just love doing it and want to do it for as long as I possibly can. So your support with aforementioned ratings and feedback and shares, etc., just so incredibly impactful and helpful to me. So thank you so much. So today's guest, this is another whole story in and of itself. I discovered our guest today, which is Casey Beros, through my dear friend, Kath Mahoney, her beautiful podcast, So I Quit My Day Job, which I just love. I went and bought Casey's book and promptly stalked her on the socials because she is awesome. She is real, she's down to earth, she's funny, she's smart. She embraces all sides of herself and even the sides that sometimes do some regrettable drunk things and way too much partying, which is something I have a little bit of experience with. And she popped up in my feed with a video about just getting started, about doing just one thing towards your goal every day, just something little, even if it's scary. And so I took her advice and I slid right on into her DMs and asked her to be a guest on my podcast, which didn't even exist yet. Long story short, obviously, she said yes because she's here and you're about to hear her episode. What a legend. Very happy and excited and chuffed that she agreed to come on. Disclaimer, I fangirl pretty hard here. It happens. She's pretty cool. I think you'll agree. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you again for being here. And here is Casey. Now, there are some people who radiate a very specific energy and it pulls you into their orbit. And this lady I'm about to speak to, she has it in droves. She's the author, presenter, facilitator, journalist, and hugger, Casey Beros. I don't get to enjoy a hug from Casey today because we're recording from opposite ends of the country. But after reading her incredible book, Bad Girl's Guide to Better, I do feel like I'm about to have a banter-filled chat with a mate. Casey's book is described as a stealth help guide to getting your act together, and it is exactly that. It's relatable, it's funny, it's real, and it's a good kick in the ass for anyone who is holding themselves back in some way. Casey's focus in the work she does is health and, more importantly, life. And while she has her shit together now, it wasn't always the case. Like many of us, Casey was bad at taking care of herself, standing up for herself, and demanding what it was she was worth. Her job is to shine a light on our shared experiences in a way that's honest, evidence-based, and where appropriate, seriously fun. A woman who firmly believes in reinvention, is good at parallel parking, and I love a gal who can boss a driver's seat. Casey, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Awesome intro. I sound very impressive.
And you look impressive today too. You actually look kind of like a race car driver in this jacket and
or
headphones.
A DJ.
Setup. Yeah, I'm channeling DJ vibes. Perfect for a Friday.
I know that song Freestyler keeps going through my head, which is kind of not my usual professional vibe, but let's run with it.
It's totally wrong with it. It sounds perfect. So Casey, before the bio I just read out, who were you?
Oh, as a kid, I was very curious. I asked lots of questions. Probably why I turned that into my career, I would think. I had this real sort of thirst for knowledge. Pre-Google, kind of showing my age, all we had was libraries and books and encyclopedias, and I loved learning. I really loved learning. I loved sport. I loved school. And then something happened somewhere in those sort of early teen years, as I think it does for so many of us, where my life just took on a different angle. And all of a sudden, I lost that childlike sense of give anything a go, nothing matters but fun. It's like life got really serious all of a sudden. And looking back, I think it was probably an undiagnosed generalized anxiety disorder that I've had for a lot longer than I have been diagnosed with. But there was also a few things that kind of happened along the way that really knocked out of me any sense of self-worth. And so I've spent a long time rebuilding that. But before all of that, I was a curious, inquisitive, we're all so perfect when we get here, right? And then things just happen along the way, and then it's our life's work to try and fix anything that we've come up against in those early years.
Isn't that so true? And I'm always grateful for whenever it got added to the DSM general anxiety disorder. It is such a gift to think about the things that are going on for your body physiologically when you're under stress, and how your mind responds, to those circumstances, and seeing it and sort of being able to, okay, I understand now what that is. Now I feel in a position to be able to look after myself better. It's a real gift.
It is. And part of the challenge is that nobody is inside our head but us. So we think that things that we are thinking and experiencing are unique to us, when in actual fact, a lot of other people are struggling with the same things. And in more recent years and even more recent decades, we've gotten a lot better at communicating about that. But the way that health journalism works is that we rely so heavily on the data and the experts to present the data. And the challenge with the data when it comes to how we feel is that we're relying on human beings, which are in essence flawed, to share with third parties, experts, scientists, researchers, what they're thinking and feeling. And there's an element of potential risk or error in there, because we curate and monitor our thoughts and feelings, and particularly how we share them with other people. And it would be so wonderful if we could scan someone's brain or crack it open and see exactly what they're thinking. And to some extent we can see when they're thinking about something that they love, or a colour that they like, or listening to a song that they recognise. But we don't really have the full gamut, or the full picture rather, of exactly how those thoughts and feelings and emotions work. And so if yours are a little bit, I don't want to use the word broken, because I hate using that word to describe myself or anybody else. But if there are some misfirings going on, that's really challenging to overcome, because it's so isolating being in that experience, seemingly on your own.
Absolutely. And it's difficult to escape, I think, the circumstances that cause your brain to do some of that, misfiring over the course of the years that we live and learn and work and do all of those things. And in doing my research about you, which was so enjoyable, so many great YouTube clips and fun things to watch and read, I got to learn all about your gig, your dream gig on Everyday Health on Channel 10. And, of course, the subsequent cancelling of the show, which I imagine must have been a huge disappointment for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I really wish that I could say that, I got the news about the cancellation and I wallowed in it for one night with wine and ice cream and tears, and then I got up the next day and brushed myself off and got on with it. And that was absolutely not my experience. I'm probably too sensitive a person for the career path that I have chosen. And I think a lot of creatives and people in the public eye would probably say the same thing.
Totally.
But I certainly... I really took a long time to grieve that as a loss, like any other loss. And I think part of the challenge with these dreams or these goals is that, firstly, that they're elastic. So when you get there, they kind of stretch into further and trickier territory. But secondly, we misguidedly base our self-worth on these achievements. So who was I without that dream having come true? And it was taken away from me in very spectacular fashion in a way that for people in the television industry, that is like the day to day. Programs get up, they don't get up, they get up for a minute, they get cancelled, they're up for years, then they get scratched, the zeitgeist moves. You hear about people like Megan Gale, for example, who was supposed to play Wonder Woman and was hanging on to play Wonder Woman for like a decade. But then for one reason or another, the project shifted and it just didn't end up happening for her. And what would her life have looked like if that had happened for her? And even if you do manage to get any of those projects up, whether it's a book or a TV show or a podcast or whatever it might be, the chances of success are so slim. So you can pour your guts into something for a really long time, and people pour decades of their lives into these sorts of projects, and still find that they don't reach the audience that they want to. So look, I had, this beautiful experience where my agent had called my husband and let him know what had happened, bless her and bless him. So he came and picked me up from the airport, and I had to listen to the head of the production company telling me that this show, this dream of mine, was cancelled. And I sat there on mute for 20 minutes, and right at the end, I managed to croak out the words, "Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm incredibly grateful," or something along those lines. And now, we're talking 5-6 years ago. So now looking back, all I have for that experience is ultimate gratitude. I learned so much. If I ever get a chance to do a program like that again, A, I won't put so much pressure on it, but B, I know exactly what I'm doing in that realm now where I was still finding my feet before. So I firmly, firmly believe that everything that we do in our lives sets us up for the next thing. Even if those skills don't necessarily feel transferable in the moment, those lessons, like those hard knocks, particularly around failure and loss and grief, we learn more from those moments than we will ever learn from the moments where we get to pop the champagne or when we really get it right. So all I have for it now is gratitude, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't take that one hard.
Yeah, of course. And it sounds like you just have the most glorious agent and partner to be able to support you emotionally through that in a way that sounded very kind.
Yes, they are wonderful people. And if that's one thing that I've learned, I have far fewer people in my life these days, but they are the best of the best. And I would crawl to the ends of the earth for them. And I know in my heart that they would do the same for me. So I couldn't be more grateful to have them. And, my husband's the most beautiful man in the world. I know I'm biased, but he loves me infinitely and unconditionally, regardless of the success of a television program or a book or, I'm constantly flubbing things on the parenting front and getting things wrong, and he loves me anyway. And that is worth so much more to me than a successful television program or a best-selling book or $1 million a year salary. Like, that's the stuff, right? When we get to the end of our lives and look back, those are going to be the things that we will be forever grateful for. So I try and hold on to that really hard.
And you mentioned your lovely kids, and it'd be remiss of me not to ask you, how do they describe their mum?
Oh gosh, look, I'd say they would probably describe me as a fun mum. So we're forever on the tramp, playing animals, watching movies. I'll never say no to an icy pole. I'm a bit of a pushover. I totally thought I would be the disciplinarian in our household, and I am not at all. But one thing that I do try and distill in them is love of music and love of people. So two kind of highest values in our household are kindness and fun. So I'll forever be putting on ridiculous music. I don't care if it's the Wiggles or if it's, R&B Fridays or whatever, but we will forever be dancing. I've totally put my back out because I've always got one on one hip and one on the other, and we'll be spinning around and laughing, and they're just delightful human beings. And, I said before that I flub parenting a lot, and I do. I think we're all just winging it and flying by the seat of our pants. Parenting is by far the hardest thing I have ever done. I would happily take 20 hours in the office over 10 hours solo with my kids. Like, I find it really genuinely challenging, even though I love them more than anything in the entire world. And I'm always scared that I'm getting it wrong. But then we'll be spinning around in the kitchen to Mariah Carey's Christmas song, and they'll be howling with laughter and these beautiful big smiles on their face. And I know in those moments that I'm getting something right. So if they were to ever lose me, I would hope that what they remembered, because they're still really little, they're only almost 2 and 4, I would hope that they would remember the good times. And one of the best things about living in this time is that we can capture a lot of this stuff, right? So sometimes I'll just set my phone on to video and just video us dancing and hanging out in the kitchen, because we lost my husband's mum a couple of years ago, and we don't have anything of her voice. We have images, but that's not the real stuff. You want the stuff where you were just having that chat about whatever in the kitchen, and we don't have that. So I'm trying to do a good job of filming as much as I can, and not the special dressed up stuff, just the day-to-day stuff, so that heaven forbid if they ever lose me, they can really get a sense of what life was like with me.
Oh, well, if I haven't taken enough away from your book, in all the millions of highlights I did, that is one tip I'm going to take away. You're so right. Those moments in the kitchen and, when you're having a fun breakfast, they're the things to just set that camera up and capture. That's such good advice. I'm going to do that. Be prepared, family and friends. You will be videoed.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a line in your book that I love. It says there comes a moment in everyone's life when they decide it's time to get their shit together. And, I think I can remember mine perfectly. And I'm really interested, what was yours like?
There were a few for me, but there was definitely a big one. I had gone and lived in Bali with my best friend, and I used to run health retreats in Australia and Indonesia and Sri Lanka. And we've been living in Bali for a while, and that hedonistic island, as beautiful as it is, I would sort of be drinking green smoothies and doing Pilates by day, and then by night partying and really not looking after myself. And I'd turned 30, and we had decided that Bali possibly wasn't the right choice of home for our business. There was lots of volcanoes impacting our ability to get guests in and out. There were just lots of challenges with travel. I mean, thank God now, right? Like in the midst of COVID, I look back and that business would have been completely obliterated. So it was kind of the right decision for me to move on from that. But when we decided that Bali wasn't the right home, we moved back to Sydney. And when I moved back to Sydney, I think I was lonely, and I had really poor self-worth, even at 30. And I guess we probably all have an idea in our head of what our life might look like at 30. 30 seems like this really big milestone. If in my head, I always thought that 30 were real adults by the time you got there, that I wouldn't go out and drink too much or kiss the wrong boy or whatever. Yeah. And I still was doing all of those things in quite the fashion, and it was making me feel awful about myself. And this sort of cycle of shame around do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, then worry about your reputation, then have a few drinks to feel better, do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, worry about your reputation. That was like lead weights on me, and somebody had thrown me into the river, and I honestly felt like I was drowning. And I remember driving around one day, I was hungover, I'd gone out on the weekend, I'd done something stupid, I was nervous that everybody was talking badly about me, and I was like, this is it. This is it. You can either keep going down that path, or you can pull your head in, be an adult, start looking after yourself and rebuild your own self-worth, because nobody is coming to do it for you. And so I started going back to yoga. I worked as much as I could. I gave up drinking for a while, and I prayed for the world's kindest man. I knew that kindness was the thing that I wanted over anything else, because I had spent more than my fair share of time with assholes. And to be fair to them, I was acting like a bit of an asshole too. So that's not me just purely pointing the finger at them like I was some sort of saint.
That's relatable.
And so I knew that I needed to build this self-respect, and that I needed to build myself an amazing life, because nobody was going to come and do that for me. And so there was a number of moments, but that was a really big one where I was like, this is it. You've got to do this for yourself.
So interesting to hear that journey that you've been on, and also so relatable in so many ways. I'd love to know, how did you meet this kind man? Where did he come from?
Well, that's a whole other podcast episode. But to give you the Twitter version, when I moved back from Bali before I got a full-time job, I was nannying for a family that I had nannied for when I had very first moved to Sydney. And their kids were getting a bit older, but when they would go away on holidays, I would often move into their house and take care of their kids, get them to school and so on. And it just so happened that my now husband was working at one of the kids' schools. And so I quite literally pulled into the pickup but in the car to pick this kid up, and this beautiful man stuck his head through my window, but the kid was nowhere to be seen. And so I pulled up ahead a little bit, and we were trying to find this kid. So he was kind of 9 at this stage, so fairly self-sufficient. I hadn't lost an infant. And so he's calling the other teachers at the other bus stops, and he's calling the receptionist, and we're all trying to work out where this child is. And he ended up coming back up to the car and saying, listen, I'm almost certain that you guys have crossed your wires. He's jumped in the car with somebody else and headed home. I think if you go home, he'll be there. Mm-hmm. And I said, can I please leave my number with you just in case he turns up and you need me to turn around and come back and get him? So I'm driving home and thinking, please, dear God, let this kid be at the house. And I walk in and the kid opens the door and goes, where have you been? And I said, where have you been? And anyway, so thank the heavens he was there and he was fine. And then I had one of those moments where I was like, I should text this teacher and let him know that he's here. And then I was like, no, that's stupid. Like, he'll contact me if he's worried. And then I remember picking up my phone. I thought, I'll send him something kind of open-ended. And I was like, hey, just letting you know that he was at home. Thank you so much. Something like, hope this doesn't affect my nomination for Babysitter of the Year award or something. So I left it open-ended enough for some back and forth. Bearing in mind, I had no idea whether this guy was married, coupled, a complete psychopath. And he had no idea about me either, even though I felt like there was something when he stuck his head through my window. And then I had my phone in my hand, and on the screen comes up the 3 dots, like almost immediately after I've sent it. And I screamed and threw my phone across the room because I thought it was broken, because I'm used to like being with these guys who, even though you know that their phone is permanently sutured to their palm, take 3 days to respond to your text because you're like number 59 on their priority list. So I thought that something had happened, and he just wrote back immediately saying like, that's cool, but you owe me one, ... And from that moment on, It was just different. If there is anybody listening to this who is still looking for their person, I don't believe in the one. I believe that if we're really lucky, we get different versions of the one. And he's definitely one of my ones. He's my forever one, I hope. But the difference with him was that it was easy. There were no games. When I would think about him, a message would pop into my phone. There was no, those moments with, I'm going to say with men, but I know that women do this too, where you're like, that's so weird that I haven't heard from them for 4 days after they sent me that message at 11 p.m. There's just those moments where you're that is just not connecting in a way that I think normal, in terms of how normal people behave.
Yeah.
And that's our intuition and our gut saying like, like this guy is not right for you, or this girl, this person is not right for you. But with him, it was easy. From the get-go, it was easy. There was never any issue, any drama. It was always kind. It was always fun, and it felt like home straight away. So within 8 months, we were engaged. Within 2 years, we were married. Within 3 years, we had a house and a baby. It was like, I thought that was never going to happen for me. And I don't believe that that's the formula for happiness either. But it was amazing how once I met him, it was just like, oh, so you're my person and now we do life together. And it just all fell into place.
Oh, that's such a nice story. And, I think that can really translate that ease, that sense of ease within the process and how things start to flow out. That comes into it when we, start trialing and testing with different career paths. And when something falls apart, something else kind of starts to pop in. And I'm really curious about how this book came about, when you made the decision, how that process was for you.
So I have wanted to write a book. I have wanted to write the book that I needed when I was growing up. since long before I was actually equipped to write it. I remember talking about it when I was like 22 and I first moved to Sydney, and I was like, young girls need this book. And I'm very lucky in that the agent that we spoke about before is a firm believer in me, and we have a really good working relationship. And I was about to go on maternity leave. I was pregnant with my second baby. We knew that I would have a stint of maternity leave coming up. And in fairness, I had been working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks prior to that. And I don't really take chunks of time off. I'm not very good. I think part of my anxiety is that I need to keep my mind busy. I need to stick within some kind of structure and routine, even when I'm on holidays. Like, just doing nothing for me is a bit of a recipe for disaster. And she knows that about me. And so even though I had a toddler and was about to have another newborn, she knew that I couldn't just take 6 months off, that my brain would need something to do. And she said, look, I think it's the time to pitch the book. Put together a 1 paragraph and let me put it to the publisher and see whether they're interested. And I just honestly got very, very lucky in that she believed in it, the publisher believed in it, and therefore I got the opportunity to do it. And I don't say that lightly, because I know that there are a lot of people listening to this who have dreams and no pathway to access them. And so I fully, hand on heart, respect how lucky I am that I have my agent and that she has those relationships, because I most certainly don't. But what I do know about ideas is that they find a way to live through you. If they're really good ideas and they're really meant for you, they find a way to come out in you. Maybe not in the original format that you thought that they would, or that perhaps in the way that they were intended, but they find a way to come out in you. So I started thinking about this book when I was, let's say 22, when I first moved to Sydney. I got the book deal when I was 35. So 13 years later. Now, I'm not saying that I had been hustling to write a book for 13 years in between, but the idea was the same. And all I knew at 22 was that I felt like I needed to share something with the world. But in retrospect, I knew nothing about life when I was 22. What I know now at 37 is that I am a perpetual student and I have so much more to learn, but that some of the things that I have been through hold value for other people, and that I can potentially be a guiding light for people who are 5, 10, 15 years earlier in the journey than I am. And that's really the intent with the book. And I wasn't in any way equipped to do that when I was 22. But now at 37, I'm like, okay, I've learned a few things, and I'm very capable of sharing them. And it is such a privilege to get paid to put how I think and feel into a Bible of sorts, which is how I've designed it. If for no one else than for my 2 little girls, that is one of the greatest privileges of my life, to have been asked to do that.
Look, and I think being able to put your thoughts and feelings out there, the world is, pretty grateful for it. Like how we even ended up talking here on this podcast today is, your encouragement of me, not directly, but just giving, a little piece to camera out to the Instagram world, totally free, to be able to say, hey, if you're getting in your own way, procrastinating over something, not doing something, why don't you just do one thing today to move closer to that goal? My one thing was sliding into your DMs. And you came back and said yes to coming on the pod. And, that was such a push for me to go like, all right, you've got to really get this pod going and get it out there. The idea was sitting in a nutshell, just kind of doing nothing. I was like, okay, you got to go now. You've really got to do this. So anytime that you put your ideas out there in the world in any way that it comes about, I just think is so wonderfully valuable. And we do have a lot more avenues, if they aren't, traditional agent or literary publisher, pathways. There are still wonderful pathways to start to get your thoughts and feelings out there if it's something you think can help other people. So
yeah, I was listening to one of Mel Robbins' audiobooks the other day, who I love. And she was saying that one of the most common questions that gets sent to her team or to her is, Mel, I really love what you do. I want to pitch a television program. Can you connect me with a broadcaster? Or I really want to pitch a book. Can you connect me with a publisher? And she's like, sure thing, YouTube and Amazon. Like you can do those two things yourself these days. You don't need a publisher. You don't need a broadcaster. You just have to pick a medium, get good at delivering that message, be consistent, and then find the audience. And I love that message. But here's what I would add. Our dreams, goals, attention span, and choice is split into a million different pathways. And part of the challenge with that is that when you try to work on too many things at once one of those things gets hard or uncomfortable or you come up against some resistance, you can easily switch to another. And then you end up with 50 or 5 projects that are half finished and never get there. And so what I am trying to apply to my own life now is pick the one thing, get the one thing up, pour everything into that bucket, and then switch focus to something else. Because for somebody like me who not only has generalized anxiety disorder, but some semblance of ADHD, is I find it very difficult to focus on one thing for any given amount of time. And that's why, you know, the book has 16 life lessons from sex to money to relationships to, I mean, it couldn't be more diverse. I couldn't have tried to cover more ground if I had tried, because that's what interests me. And I wanted to be able to impart something on what I believe are 16 of the most important parts of everybody's lives. So it serves a purpose in that realm, but generally in my life, I'm like, this feels sticky, yuck, I'm going to move on to something else. And then that thing never gets done. So all that happens is my to-do list grows exponentially, and then I just feel overwhelmed by my own to-do list. And that's ridiculous. I'm never going to get through my to-do list. If you haven't already, have a listen to Oliver Burkeman, he used to write a productivity column for The New Yorker, I think. And he has just released a book called 4,000 Weeks, which is based on the fact that if we live till 80, we get 4,000 weeks here. Oh, wow. And so for somebody who spent his entire career teaching people and teaching himself to be more productive, all that created for him and for so many others, myself included, was this sense of anxiety and dread. I'm never going to get there. But perhaps when I do, if I can just implement the Pomodoro technique, download yet another app that will help me check off all of my to-do list, I'll color code, I'll sit down, I'll prioritize. Once I get to the end of the list, my life will feel so clear. I will have Mariette Kondo'd the shit out of my life, out of my to-do list, and I'll feel much better about it. And it doesn't work like that. You know, your inbox will always fill up. The clothes will always need to be washed. There will always be things that need to be done. And if you spend your whole life chasing this sense of a clear deck, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So his position now is find the things that are most important and go hard after those, and then basically don't worry about the rest. And there's something really appealing about that to me.
It is excellent advice. My partner is studying to become a psychologist. He's well on his way to become a psychologist. He had his own life change. But he tells me every day when he looks at my to-do list, he's like, oh, this looks like a big piling stink of self-sabotage. How much are you trying to achieve? So he's just using that back on me in my own language, just to say, like, yeah, if you've given yourself this much to do, there's no way you can achieve it. So then you have a reason to feel bad about yourself. And that is that self-sabotage loop. Yeah. And while I hate hearing it, it's very true. It's something I think a lot of us do, just
totally
put ourselves out of success.
And I use this digital to-do list board called Trello. I don't know if you've used it or heard of it.
I've seen it.
Probably very similar to any others, but you basically put each task as kind of a card and create lists, and then you can move them around. And there's an app and a desktop thing. And you're supposed to only have 3 things on your do today list. Yep. And I'll get to the point where there's 18 things on that list, and they'll be on there for 4 months. And so now I've started creating more immediate lists to the left, absolutely must do today. You cannot not do this today. There are 3 or 4 other more immediate lists that I just shuffle things around. Honestly, I don't have the answers to that, but I think that Oliver Bergman is onto something in that we need to really focus on the big important things, and I am absolutely guilty of doing the little silly things. Like it's much easier for me to, I don't know, put on the load of washing than it is to sit down and conceptualize what my next book looks like. So I will always go and fold the washing, and then I'll never get to the big things that are actually really important to me because I can't find the big blocks of time. And that's one of the things that Mel Robbins says that I really like is if you're waiting for the full day that's clear or the 4 hours or the 2 hours, particularly if you're a parent, those chunks of time are so bloody hard to find. You'll probably never get there. But if you can use this 5 minutes and that 10 minutes and that 20 minutes, you'll get there. It just might take you a little bit longer. And there's something that I really like about that too. So we're so lucky that we have these incredible minds that we get to learn from and that can sort of light the way for us.
It's such the benefit of our digital age, just how much information we can access, but finding the right information can be a bit of a minefield. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that the big thing about change is if you can't see that end goal, you can't see exactly what it's going to look like, exactly how it's going to be. It's very difficult to get started, which I find a lot of people are struggling with, particularly we're recording this at the very end of the year when energy is down, everybody's tired, but a lot of people are still looking to make a change in their life in some way, shape or form. But just chunking down, those little steps to be able to get to the next thing is just such brilliant advice. And I'm really curious about the time where you had kind of had to shift your focus, being that role was taken away, everything started to change, and you had to sort of start to map out your career again in a new way, and what that looked like for you, how you started to chunk down the big parts of that story.
Look, I think I was just talking to somebody about this morning, actually. If you are a builder, you get a contract, build the house, move on from the house, get a new contract, build the next house. If you are employed by an organisation, your trajectory, your employment trajectory, if not your success trajectory, is far more linear than if you work for yourself. And I love the title of your podcast because I am afraid as hell. Like, it's not easy working for yourself or being on your own or giving up a gig or having a gig taken away from you. And I think that the biggest challenge for all of us is finding a way to see ourselves as a brand, which is what many creatives are, and that's certainly what I am, that might have, so to use myself as the example, I might have TV projects and podcast stuff and facilitation stuff and speaking things and other book deals and other engagement. And it's almost like those projects never end. They have this kind of ongoing life cycle that means that you never really get to put them down necessarily. And I think you can become sort of disenamored with them. You can burn out a little bit. And look, there's something about this whole brand you thing that stresses me out. I know that a lot of young people are talking about, that their kind of highest goal in life is to become an influencer. And there's something that really, really worries me about that. Wanting to be influential is awesome. I love that for all of us. Whether you're influencing, I think it's Oprah says something like, the size of your soul is only in direct proportion to the amount of people that you are able to influence. But outside of that, we are all exactly the same. So our power differs, but our value is the same. And I loved when I learned that there's this kind of horizontal leveling of all of us having, yes, some of us have easier privileges than others that may make it easier to step into certain roles. And I include myself in that. I fully appreciate that I am an incredibly privileged, cisgendered white woman living in one of the greatest countries on earth. I couldn't have more opportunity, had access to education. I own that privilege and also the challenges of that privilege in terms of the lens that I see the world through. But when you find your thing, I think that makes it infinitely easier because whilst the day-to-day might feel messy, at least the why or the focus can really be lasered down into this is what it is that I'm trying to achieve, not just for myself, but also for the world. So I don't actually know whether that answers your question, but I think that we need to get much better at really asking ourselves what it is that we want, because life is hard and going at any goal or any dream is scary and takes gumption, and I learn that every single day. And if you don't ask yourself the right questions, then I think we can very easily find ourselves on a path that perhaps was not meant for us, and we should have the guts to change that.
I agree, and there are thankfully so many more tools around to help us figure out the answer to that. You know, when I went on my own change journey, I had no idea what it was that I was going to end up doing. I certainly didn't think I'd end up doing A, this, or B, making ceramics. Like, that was random. But just being able to ask ourselves the question, whether it be through journaling, whether it be through, you know, engaging with content or whatever it is, just changing that narrative and getting the headspace to influence yourself instead of being influenced all the time. You know, I find that particularly if you are, you know, working in an organization that has a firm trajectory, or, you know, working to an overall goal that has a firm trajectory, it's very, very difficult to get that headspace to figure out who you are. So much of who you are is in this book. And I mean, the stories are so great, like so funny, so awkward. I feel like I've been there. Like,
oh yeah,
you reveal a lot, but I love that because, you know, it's the sorts of things that a lot of people don't talk about and should talk about. But I'm curious, putting that out in the world must have been a little extra layer of scary for you.
Oh God, yeah. God, yeah. And look, I'm a journalist. My job is to take myself out of the story, unless I'm on television or something where I'm, you know, hosting the story. But generally, my job is to stay out of it. And so, yeah, it was scary. And look, I did a, what's the right word? Sort of an approval read with my mum, with my dad, with my sister, with my husband, to make sure that they were absolutely comfortable with what I was sharing in there. And the one thing that I said to my publisher is, when you read this, can you please pick a fight with me as to all of the things that you think that the media might throw at me? And if I can easily defend it and I feel very comfortable defending that, then it stays in. But if I'm like, and I feel stuck and cornered, then that's not the right story to include. Yeah. And look, the stories are only ever included for context. It sets up, what I try and do is blend the sentiment or the storytelling with the science, so the research and the data, and then try and give some kind of skill or action off the back of that, which is why there's those bad to better takeaways at the end of each lesson, because I want it to be super actionable. But if there's one thing that I know after 15 years of asking experts questions, it's that we cannot keep delivering the same information in the same ways and expect a different result. And whilst we have more information than we have ever had at our fingertips via our smartphones, if you look at any of the data around our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, our financial health, I don't know how much better off we are for it. I could Google something from Harvard right now and have like the cream of the crop information, Harvard Medical School, at my fingertips. But the vast majority of people don't know that that's where they should go. So they get their information from Facebook or from, you know,
said influencer,
the Daily Mail, or exactly, or an influencer. And I think how wonderful that we have these incredible platforms. The challenge is that we can't drown the wrong voices out. And in health and wellbeing specifically, that's really scary, because it means that people are taking their cues from the wrong people. And, you know, the experts that I work with have worked for decades, most of them, to get to where they are. And they are absolutely the right people to be listening to when it comes to our health and our wellbeing. And so, look, it was scary putting that out there, because it's different. It's not a traditional self-help book. we call it a stealth help is the genre because, yes, you get the wisdoms, but I designed it to be equally as entertaining as it is educational. And my hope is that it feels like lunch with your best mates crossed with a therapy session. So you should absolutely gain wisdom and insights, but I want you to like cry, laugh a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so that was the challenge that I set myself. And I think that I achieved that. That seems to be the feedback that comes back in. My best friend actually, when she read it, said like, I think you're going all self-helpy on me. And then all of a sudden I'm crying with laughter again. Yeah. And so I hope it feels, part of your intro of me was that I'm a hugger, and I am totally a hugger. In fact, I think somebody once described me as handsy, which is probably pretty apt. But yeah, I am very affectionate, and the greatest compliment that people give me is that it feels like I'm sitting next to them, reading to them. And there is nothing better than when somebody comes up to me and says like, I read your book and it did this for me. And I get to give them a big hug because I want the book to feel like a big hug. And getting to do that for people is such a pleasure.
It's a real gift to give, to be able to share your story in a way that helps other people follow their own dreams or find themselves in a better situation that they were in before. It's a huge gift. And we had the pleasure of chatting before we hit record, which was super nice. And I got to hear about your next thing that you're doing as well, which actually inadvertently segues from when we were talking about, taking a look at your own life and asking yourself the key questions. So good segue to tell me more about that.
Drum roll, please. So I have put together a workshop called The Life Edit. And The Life Edit is based on, for 15 years, I have been asking people questions about how we can all, as consumers, live happier, healthier lives. And over that time, I've curated a list of 10 questions that I believe we all need to be able to answer so that we know, or so that we have a much clearer picture at least of who we are, what we want, and how we'll get it. So the Life Edit is me turning the tables on you. I ask you the 10 questions that I believe that we all need to know, because the future is somewhere that we have never been, right? We have no GPS, no map, no model. Certainly once you have a really good sense of what it is that you want to achieve, there are people that you can follow. You can kind of model the masters, which is one of the things that I talk about in the book. But before you get there, there are a whole bunch of questions that we need to be able to answer. And not only before you get there, but frequently throughout our lives. And if there's one thing that I got really frustrated by as a health journalist, and still do, is that I feel like we're constantly being told to do more, add more in. I feel like we've got so many steps in our morning routine. We'd give an IKEA bookshelf a run for its money in terms of number of instructions. We're always like, you need to run, but don't run too hard or you do wear and tear on your joints. So make sure you do some Pilates and yoga to stretch out, and eat this, but don't eat that, and make sure you call your mum and you've got a meal prep and yada, yada. Like, it's too much, right?
It is, yeah.
And so the Life Edit is really about taking this amazing life that you already have. I mean, there are 7.8 billion people of us almost in the world, and there is only one of you, which just blows my mind and I think is absolutely incredible. There are good things in your life, in all of our lives, that are really working for us, but we probably don't take time to appreciate them as much as we should. And there's incredible evidence around gratitude. So we identify those things, and then we have a look at what's not working, and particularly across the 4 major pillars of what I believe and what I believe the science backs up leads to the happiest, healthiest life, which is connection with ourselves, with our people, with our community, our health and well-being, so mental health, physical health, emotional health, even financial health, which leads into money, which is a huge determinant of how long we live, how well we live, and how happy we are. And purpose. So finding out what on earth it is that we were put here to do. So we look at all of those elements, and then we work out what isn't working, because I think we're such creatures of habit. We often continue friendships that perhaps don't serve us anymore. We stay doing the same kinds of habits, even though they're not necessarily giving us the returns that we are after. So looking back and editing or auditing our lives is is something that we sorely need to do, but we never, ever take time to do. So I've packaged it all up into a nice, neat little package called the Life Edit, and that'll launch somewhere in Jan 2022. So I'm so excited.
It sounds brilliant, and it really sounds like the perfect place to start if you are on a journey of change. It's something that retrospectively I wish I had done when I was out, on my own, trying to figure out what my next career was going to be, rushing to that end goal without asking any of the core questions. We're so used to having everything at our fingertips. We even expect our own success and happiness to be like, click the fingers overnight. I got it. This is what I'm meant to do, and I'm flying. And that journey of that change, that success, the redefinition of success is, I think, an ever-moving piece. It's always changing. And I'm interested what your definition of success is for yourself today.
That's such a good question. Look, the one thing that I know about success is that the trajectory towards it is so far from linear, and particularly in a creative industry whereby your value is really difficult to measure. So if you work in finance or sales, you can work out how much you're worth to an organization by how much you bill, for example. But on a creative level, sure, I could measure my worth, my professional worth, by how many books I sell, or how many people my TV shows reach, or whatever it might be. That they're really intangible measures. So I try really hard to focus on what is a successful life to me. And the way that I do that frequently, and it's a little bit morbid, my dad has always said that I've got probably too good a sense of my own mortality, is that I put myself in the shoes of, this is my last day. I'm saying goodbye, and what is important to me today, and I try really hard to hold on to that with both hands. Now, don't get me wrong, I still stress out over really stupid things, like why that post didn't do well, and that book pitch getting knocked back, and all of the stupid stuff. Like I'm not superhuman. But what it does do is keep in perspective the things that are going to be really important to me on that day. So I'll often, come home so that I can be with my kids during the day and then work late into the night, or get up and work early, or whatever it might be, because I just know, what's important. Now, I still have to pay the bills. I still have to keep food on the table. Like, the realities of my life are just that I have to keep working. But I do really try, there's that saying that you can have it all, but you just can't have it all at once. And I would argue that working parents in particular don't have a fucking choice in that. We have to have it all at once, because one doesn't wait for the other. And especially for women who get out of the workforce and then try to get back in, like, we've made some real ground, but we are still not there in terms of being really fair to parents. And I would actually argue that by the time you've had kids and worked out how to do that, you are a much better employee than you ever were before, because you're much, much better at your time. You are very good at going like, right, I've got an hour of power, I'm going to get into this. And so I think that a lot of people who would listen to this podcast might find themselves pre-kids in a stable role, and then after kids they're like, no, I want more flexibility than this. And so I think you become quite well primed actually to work for yourself. You spent probably a few years working for somebody else and building your skill and working out what you're good at, what you like, what you don't, and then you want something that's a little bit more flexible and perhaps may have a different return for you in the future. And so, yeah, I think success for me now, I'd really like to be financially comfortable. And by that I mean be able to whisk my parents away on a holiday just because I want to. Or, I'd love to own my house outright one day in the future. I'd love to just be able to donate a big chunk of money to charity or to a fundraiser or something, and not hurt. Or if your car's engine blows up, of course you're like, oh, that's annoying, but the money piece isn't stressful. One thing that we know is that the number one stress of all Australians is about money. And it's such a shame that it is so stressful. And again, I earn really good money. I have an incredibly supportive husband. I'm speaking from a very privileged perspective. I fully appreciate that there are people out there doing it far, far tougher. And I think one of the biggest things that we need to do as a society is change our attitude towards money and empower people to live more financially fulfilling lives, because that really does have a big impact on how happy we are and on how healthy we are.
I agree. If there were some lessons I had learned earlier in life about setting yourself up financially, about, making those steps that you need to secure what you're talking about, which is essentially freedom to live, not necessarily being on a yacht and, dripping in gold, but freedom to be able to live happily and comfortably is, the goal. And we can get there closer, we can get there easier with a little bit of those skill sets being defined, earlier in life. And I think that's a brilliant goal to have to define your success by, how much time you're spending doing the things that you love and how you're facilitating your end goal of feeling more free to enjoy that. It's, what else is there really at the end of the day than feeling safe and free to live the life that you want to live. And you've just put so much support out there, with the book, with the life edit coming out, with, all of the work that you're doing, which is a great purpose for doing whatever the challenge is or the job is that's in front of you. It's a bloody great purpose to work from. And where do you go for your support these days?
I have a couple of really amazing mentors. So they're more personal mentors than professional mentors, and I honestly couldn't do life without them. So I am forever picking up the phone to people like my mum and my sister. I talk things through with my husband a lot. My beautiful godmother who lives up in Byron Bay. I've got another incredible mentor who lives in Sydney, and a couple of other really amazing professional mentors that I can bounce things off. And, I just picked up the phone to someone this morning. I had a couple of questions about where to from here in one particular market for my book. And she was so wonderfully helpful and helped me crystallize we were legitimately on the phone for 11 minutes, and I have been doing laps in my head for weeks about where to from here, and in 11 minutes she was able to crystallize that for me. Wow. So we need to leverage more outside opinion. Trusted outside opinion is vital in helping shepherd us in where to go. Now, don't get me wrong, I know that we need to absolutely cultivate our gut skills and our intuition skills and stand on our own 2 feet and all of those sorts of things. But I think we also can lean more heavily on the people around us. I will often ask, my 89-year-old grandfather, what are the things that he has learned that are most important in his life? My 88-year-old grandmother, what would she do differently if she got the chance again? I mean, you see the journalist in me coming out, right? This is what I've been like since I was born. I want to know the answer to that stuff because experience and applied wisdom is so much more powerful than information on the internet. It's the reason that if Facebook, for example, the old school version of Facebook was like one nonna talking to the other nonna over the back fence in the backyard and sharing wisdoms. And then they'd go off and tell all of their other nonna friends what nonna A or nonna B just said. Now we've got that on steroids times 7.8 billion, close to at least. And that can be really, really powerful, and it can also be really, really risky and dangerous. And so I try really hard to leverage my inner circle, but also not be afraid to pick up the phone. People love sharing their knowledge. I mean, look at me. I'm sitting here with you chatting, like talking away about myself for an hour. It's like free therapy. People love sharing their experience. And one of the things I say in the book, and I do a whole chapter on success, is like you need to find your mentors. If you reach out to 10 of them, I guarantee you'll get a result from one.
So true.
And, okay, so for me, I might not be able to get a result from Oprah, but I might be able to get a result from Keith Abraham, who's an incredible motivational speaker in Australia. So you just have to try all of the people. And I would also add to that, be really specific about what it is that you want from them. Tell them exactly what you want. I've put together this thing. Would you kindly take a look and give me some feedback or whatever it is? And that's really straying, I suppose, more into that kind of mentorship space professionally. But outside of that, for me personally, in terms of support, it's just my family.
Mm-hmm.
It really is my family, and a handful of amazing, amazing friends who I honestly couldn't live without. Like, that's the good stuff, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, you know, we're built to lean on our community to help us be the best version of ourselves. And that community can come from so many places. So, you know, keep shooting for Oprah as well. You just never know. She might respond
one day.
Yeah.
My sister lives in Chicago. I always say to her, like, you've just got to find her house and just throw a copy of my book over the fence.
Yes.
One day.
You're close. What do they say? We're all like 6 degrees of separation away from Kevin Bacon. Like, it's something like that. You just never know. You've just got to put yourself out there.
You do.
Casey, I had so many paragraphs from your book highlighted in my Kindle that I had to export them and save it as a file on my computer. So I took that much away from it. It's 100% that bestie in the book as you described. So thank you for creating it. And, you know, listener, if you haven't read it yet, do go do that. And what else can the listener and I do to support you on the work that you're doing?
Look, outside of coming up and saying hello next time you see me, following me on social media is a big help. I love building my little community there. So that's at Casey Beros. And there's also a Bad Girls page, which is just full of memes and funny stuff.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's at the Bad Girls Guide to Better. And over on my website, actually, which is just caseyberos.com, I've just put up a sign up for my newsletter, and you get my free ebook, which is called Chuck It in the Fucker Bucket and Move On, a handy guide to moving past your mistakes. So it's my 8-step process for getting over something that you've done that's shitty in your past. I spent a long time trying to work that one out. And in fairness, I don't spam people. I'm pretty lazy on that front. So you'll be lucky if you get something from me every quarter. But that's a bit of fun. So yeah, head over there and reach out and say hello. And I love, you know, being on podcasts and speaking to people like you. And with the Life Edit rolling out next year, I'll be able to do that in person, fingers crossed, with borders opening, or this year I should say, because you'll publish this in Jan. So
I will.
2022, we're totally new people.
Oh, how exciting. Bring it on. I'll definitely make sure all of those links are in the show notes, which will be available for the listener, so you can click and do all the things. Casey, it has been such a joy chatting with you today. I'm very grateful for you giving up your time and sharing your story so openly. It's a really big gift to give to the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
See you. Bye. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram at Unemployed and Afraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.